This is a special report from CBS News. From New York, here is CBS News correspondent Robert Trout.
Good evening. This has been a day of official mourning. The members of the dead president's official family, the familiar faces from the other branches of government, the representatives of foreign governments making the short, quick walk across the carpet of the vast East Room of the White House, past the coffin beneath the flag, past the candles and the flowers, the guard of honor, and the praying priests. Later will come the mourners who are not official. As the lights were coming on in Washington tonight, President Johnson proclaimed a day of mourning for everyone in this statement at the White House.
People of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, has been taken from us by an act which outrages decent men everywhere. He upheld the faith of our fathers, which is freedom for all men. He broadened the frontiers of that faith, and he backed it with the energy and the courage which are the mark of the nation that he led. A man of wisdom, strength, and peace, he molded and moved the power of our nation in the service of a world of growing liberty and order. All who love freedom will mourn his death. As he did not shrink from his responsibilities, but welcomed them, so he would have us not shrink from carrying on his work beyond this hour of national tragedy. He said it himself: the energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. Now therefore I, Lyndon B. Johnson, President of the United States of America, do appoint Monday next, November 25, the day of the funeral service of President Kennedy, to be a national day of mourning throughout the United States. I earnestly recommend the people to assemble on that day in their respective places of divine worship, there to bow down in submission to the will of Almighty God, and to pay their homage of love and reverence to the memory of a great and good man. I invite the people of the world who share our grief to join us in this day of mourning and rededication. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States of America to be affixed. Done at the city of Washington, this the 23rd day of November, in the year of our Lord 1963, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 188th.
The rain that soaked the White House lawn today added its grayness to the solemnity and the grief. The black draperies, the hushed voices, the stiff figures in uniforms, the day-long line of slowly moving limousines. This was a White House that Washington and the world had not seen since the April day that Franklin Roosevelt died. On a rainy Saturday in November, this is how the White House looked on the last day that John Fitzgerald Kennedy would be there.
A former Republican President, Dwight Eisenhower, led the day-long parade of dignitaries entering the north portico of the White House to view Mr. Kennedy's coffin. The nation's 34th president was met on the portico by Sergeant Shriver, brother-in-law of the late President Kennedy. The 36th president, Lyndon Johnson, received General Eisenhower inside. Later they spent 15 minutes conferring on world affairs. Under the weeping skies, the Chief Justice of the United States, Earl Warren, was the next dignitary by protocol to enter. After him, through the day, came presidential appointees, governors, senators, and congressmen, friends and foes of Mr. Kennedy in life, joined in sorrow. And in mid-afternoon, shortly after his arrival in Washington, the nation's 33rd president, Harry Truman, come to pay his respects. Truman, who said on his accession to the presidency, "It was as if the whole weight of the moon and the stars fell on me." This is what the dignitaries saw in the East Room of the White House, the casket closed, draped in an American flag. 2 priests in constant attendance offering up prayers for the late Mr. Kennedy's soul. An honor guard from the services always present. At the Capitol, preparations for the public to view the casket tomorrow. The historic Lincoln catafalque being erected in the Capitol Rotunda, where the body will lie in state tomorrow afternoon and Monday morning. The coffin will be borne by caisson with muffled drums to the Capitol, and there in the rotunda the stone faces of 2 other martyrs will look down on a nation's grief. President Garfield, who was shot down in 1881, and President Lincoln, assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in 1865. Now a new victim of the assassin's bullets to rest briefly under the Capitol dome. The funeral takes place Monday afternoon at St. Matthew's Cathedral. Word on the burial plans now from the White House. CBS News correspondent Paul Niven reporting.
President Kennedy is to be buried after his funeral on Monday at Arlington National Cemetery. That cemetery is, of course, open to all ex-servicemen. However, the only previous president to be buried there is William Howard Taft. I asked News Secretary Salinger whether President Kennedy had ever expressed the wish that he be interred at Arlington. Salinger apparently did not know. He replied, "At any rate, it is the wish of the family." He did not know either whether Caroline and John Kennedy Jr. would accompany their mother and their father's remains in any of the solemn processions, from the White House to the Capitol tomorrow, and then from the Capitol to the church, and from the church to Arlington. Added tonight to the list of foreign dignitaries expected here are King Baudouin of Belgium, Crown Prince Beatrix of the Netherlands, Crown Prince Akihito and Premier Ikeda of Japan, and the new Premier of South Vietnam, Nguyen Nhat To. On Tuesday, President Johnson will meet some of the overseas visitors, including, presumably, British Prime Minister Sir Alec Douglas-Home and French President Charles de Gaulle. On Wednesday, Mr. Johnson will address a joint session of Congress. Meanwhile, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, in death, spends his last night in the White House. The Washington Star, a newspaper not notably sympathetic to Mr. Kennedy politically, said of him today, he walked like a prince, and he talked like a scholar. Now back to Robert Trout in New York.
Here in New York, the man who nearly became the nation's 35th president this afternoon spoke of the man who did. This is what Richard Nixon said.
Gentlemen, I have a brief statement to make. In view of the nature of the statement, I would appreciate it if we would not go into any other questions at this time. President Kennedy yesterday wrote the final and greatest chapter in his profiles of courage. Today, millions of people throughout the world are trying to find words adequate to express their grief and their sympathy to his family. The greatest tribute we could all pay to his memory would be in our everyday lives to do everything we possibly can to reduce the hatred that drives men to such terrible deeds.
A bitter political opponent of John Kennedy's in life, Alabama's Governor George Wallace flew to Washington to pay his respects to the president who was dead.
Well, other than to say that I'm sure that I speak for all the people of Alabama when I say that we are deeply grieved and saddened by this taking of the life of the President of the United States. This has been truly an attack on the American system and on the American people, and it's truly a sad day, and we in Alabama are grieving about the loss of the President of the United States.
As a Southerner, I imagine you're proud to see a fellow Southerner now take the reins of office.
Well, I do not want to mention anything about politics because this matter transcends all political considerations at this time, and all I can say is it's a sad day.
The shock of the event, a blow so sudden, so unexpected, spread its waves round the globe. It ignored all boundaries, and it shook the world's leaders and their peoples. It brought forth broken words in strange tongues and statements of melancholy eloquence. These are some of the things that some of the statesmen said. First, Sir Alec Douglas-Home of Great Britain.
In 3 short years of his presidency, he left an indelible mark on his country and on the world. And for us in Britain, his loss is a deep and a sad one, because he was the most loyal and faithful of allies.
On the Adriatic, in Yugoslavia, here is Marshal Tito.
I have recently an opportunity to talk casually with the President.
In Rome, at the Vatican, here is Pope Paul VI. We're sorry we lost the sound on those statements. But the explosive news of the crime did circle the world, respecting neither political point of view nor the time of day. From Paris now, this report from Blaine Littell.
There is still an atmosphere of disbelief in Paris. Somehow, news like this cannot be absorbed or understood all at once. It all happened too suddenly. Nevertheless, there are few Frenchmen today who do not know about the death of President Kennedy and who do not deeply mourn his passing. The French heard about the assassination early in the evening, over their radio and television sets and through their newspapers. Paris first editions were sold out almost as soon as they came off the presses. Without exception, they eulogized the president, the young chief of the strongest democracy in the world. The headline in Paris Jour reading, "A great friend is dead." The French Senate interrupted a debate on the budget and stood while its president recited a eulogy. Then the Senate adjourned until Monday as a sign of mourning. The flag at the American Embassy in Paris flies at half-mast today, as do all flags on similar American buildings abroad. From the Élysée Palace, President Charles de Gaulle declared that President Kennedy died like a soldier, under fire, for his duty and in the service of his country. And de Gaulle added, "In the name of the French people, a friend always of the American people, I salute this great example and this great memory." It will take time, much more time, before Americans in Paris and the French themselves grow accustomed to the tragic news from Dallas. This is Blaine Littell in Paris.
In Dallas, the police continued to reconstruct the facts, studying evidence, listening to accounts of the movements of the prime suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, who went through a day of interrogation as state, federal, and local officials built their case against him. We switch to Dan Rather in Dallas.
Jail in Dallas. It's located a short distance from the city jail where Lee Oswald is now. This county jail is the likely next stop for the man accused of being the assassin of President Kennedy. Oswald has been at the city jail since his arrest yesterday in connection with the shooting death of President Kennedy. Once police are finished questioning him, at least finished with their initial interrogation, Oswald will be transferred from the city jail to here. Outside in front of the county jail, crowds have gathered all day long. The crowds have been here to see the wreath. It was placed in the small park just a few yards from where President Kennedy was shot. They came to see the exact spot in the street where the fatal bullet hit President Kennedy, and to look at the building, the Texas School Book Depository, from which the assassin's bullet came. The bullet came from a window, 1 story below the top story, the corner window. And after seeing the spot in the building and the window, the crowds turned their attention back to the jailhouse, hoping for a glimpse of the man accused of firing the shot. This is Dan Rather in the county jail at Dallas, Texas.
Accused, but so far Lee Oswald has admitted nothing. The killing of John Fitzgerald Kennedy was a deed that swept other events out of mind. But let's take a moment now to report other news. Novelist Aldous Huxley died last night in Hollywood at 69, a victim of cancer. A member of the eminent British family of letters and sciences, Aldous Huxley wrote more than 20 books, the best known of which was Brave New World. A disaster of major proportions struck early today in the little town of Fitchville in Ohio, and CBS newsman Russ Bensley has that story.
On any other day, this would have been banner headlines. On any other day, this would have stunned and shocked the nation. The worst fire disaster in this country in 5 years. 64 elderly men and women dead in the ruins of a nursing home. But it came on a day when the national capacity for shock and sadness had been extended nearly to the limit, and this story took second place. Except for those who were there, or those whose parents and loved ones were counted among the victims, or those who arrived in time to see what it looked like. They found their capacity for shock was considerably enlarged. The Golden Age nursing home, 8 miles from Norwalk, Ohio, contained almost 90 persons when the fire began early today. 64 could not escape in time. The death toll was the greatest in this country since the Chicago school fire tragedy in 1958.
Italy's premier designate, Aldo Moro, today announced agreement on the two issues that were blocking the formation of a new center-left government, agriculture and foreign policy. The left-wing socialist leader, Pietro Nenni, had been hesitant about Italy's commitment to a NATO nuclear force. Seemingly, this agreement opens the way for the Nenni socialists to join in a coalition government for the first time in 16 years. Moro, who you know leads the Christian Democrats of Italy, will head a government made up of his own and 3 other political parties. Earlier this week, an Austrian named Karl Silberbauer was found in Vienna and identified as the Gestapo agent who was responsible for the arrest 19 years ago of Anne Frank, whose diary has since become a symbol of the Nazi persecution of Jews. CBS News correspondent Daniel Shore went to Amsterdam to discuss the latest turn in the Frank case with Dr. Louis de Jong, the director of the Netherlands Institute for War Documentation. Their conversation brought out the way the discovery of Silberbauer came about.
Dr. de Jong, the organization that you direct has a rather mild name of Netherlands Institute for War Documentation, but has been engaged in a pretty grim task of looking for Nazi persecutors. Can you tell us a bit about that work?
Mr. Shaw, we are historians, and as such we have assembled a great amount of documentary material in Amsterdam, and we are only too willing to help people in this country and in other countries to track down war criminals and bring them to trial.
To your mind, was this cop, Silberbauer, simply doing his duty with no moral blame attaching to him?
Well, I suppose that nobody forced him to become a member of the SS or to take up this particular assignment in hunting Jews in a town like Amsterdam. Moreover, I think it should be kept in mind that most of these people, apart from the fact that they received a decent salary and, of course, that they were not being sent to the Russian front, received extra pay for every Jew they found in hiding in Amsterdam. I've got a document here which proves that people of this nature were paid 750 Dutch guilders, that means about $2, for every Jew they found. So he may well have touched an extra $2 for having Anne Frank arrested in the house in Amsterdam.
$16 for the whole family.
And $16 for the whole family.
Now, Silberbauer got his information that the Franks were hiding in this little house from someone. So he has said. What's happened to the Dutch person who denounced the Franks?
I believe that the name of this Dutch informer, who was an employee of the firm that had been set up by Father Frank, is known now to the Dutch police authorities. And I am hoping, I am expecting that he will be arrested pretty soon.
Would you consider this simply small fry, after all, a sergeant in 1934 and still a sergeant? What do you think is the importance of a man named Silberbauer?
Well, Mr. Shore, 5 to 6 million Jews have been killed in Europe during the war, and Anne Frank has become a symbol. there have been tens of thousands of people who had a full-time job in rounding up these people, shipping them to places like Auschwitz. And now this Mr. Silberbauer, who was a sergeant, an SS Unterscharführer, has become a symbol too.
Thank you, Dr. de Jong.
Earlier on this program, we saw Pope Paul making his statement on the President's death. Now another report from Vatican City, this one on the Ecumenical Council and the proposal before it to have the Catholic Church absolve the Jews from the blame of the death of Christ, a proposal that many Arabs oppose. We call on Rome now, and CBS News correspondent Winston Burdett.
Two of the major proposals now before the Vatican Council appear today to be in danger of being shelved indefinitely. The two proposals are those on Jews and religious liberty. Both form chapters in a larger draft decree on Christian unity, and on both there is very strong feeling for and against among the bishops at the Council. The entire decree, with its two disputed sections, was prepared and presented to the Council by the Special Secretariat for Promoting Christian Unity. Members of the Secretariat admit today that the Declaration on Jews may be shelved, although they insist that there's no danger of its being scuttled. The Declaration absolves the Jews of all blame for the crucifixion of Christ and says that all humanity was responsible for that crime. None of the bishops at the Council has objected to the contents of this statement, but several have argued that it is out of place in a decree devoted to the problem of Christian unity. If the Jews are mentioned, they have said, why is there no word about the Muslims? The strongest resistance has come from the bishops and patriarchs of the Oriental Catholic churches in the Middle East. Their argument is that a favorable statement on the Jews could be misinterpreted by the Arabs in the Middle Eastern countries and so could damage the position of the Christian minorities who live there. Because of the resistance, the Council leadership has now decided to hold a special vote on the two disputed proposals. The bishops will be asked whether they want to keep these proposals as parts of the decree on Christian unity or lift them out, put them aside, and handle them as separate items at some future time. The great majority of the American bishops here supports both proposals and wants to debate them now, and undoubtedly would be very disappointed if they were to be sidetracked more or less indefinitely. In some council quarters, it is feared that if the Declaration on Jews should now be shelved, it might never get back to the floor of the council again. This is Winston Burdett in Rome.
Here in New York, the New York and American stock exchanges say they will remain closed on Monday because of the president's funeral. The American exchange said that it will reopen at its regular time on Tuesday, but a spokesman for the New York Stock Exchange said, Tuesday is a business day. We will be open on a business day unless there is a further announcement. This is as far as the presidential story has gone on this Saturday evening. The body of the late president lies in the East Room of the White House. He will be buried at the National Cemetery in Arlington. Monday is a day of mourning throughout the nation, proclaimed by President Johnson. The police in Dallas say they are positive that Lee Oswald is the man who murdered the president, but he has presumably not confessed. He was the youngest president, in appearance, words, and in action, the farthest removed from the end of life. His sudden death made everyone suddenly feel more vulnerable. Later, there will come the time to pick up again at normal pace the complex pulse of the nation that is now slowed. Later, for now is still the time of mourning. CBS Television will continue to present its schedule of special programs, including tonight a concert by the Philadelphia Orchestra with Eugene Ormandy. This is Robert Trout in New York.
This has been a special report from CBS News, continuing our schedule of special programs throughout the day and night. This is the CBS Television Network.